The child was never meant to exist. Not in this time, not in this life. In the moment this child took their first breath, time itself began to breath. Night was too quiet. No birds, no wind. Even the fire seemed afraid to crackle, somewhere deep. In the highlands, far from Fraser's ridge, a child was being born under a sky that felt heavy with warning. This was not a joyful birth. It was a fearful one. It's a kind of birth that makes grown men step back and women whisper prayers they barely remember, because everyone in that room felt the same thing. This child did not belong to this moment in history. Claire felt it first. Before the cries, before the blood was washed away, a tight knot formed in her chest, the same feeling she had only felt when time itself pulled her through the stones. As a doctor, she knew births. As a time traveler, she knew danger. And this birth felt like both. The child's heartbeat was strong, steady, and wrong for the year they were born into. Wrong for the world that waited outside those walls. Jamie stood nearby, silent, his hand resting on the doorframe as if holding the house together. He had faced wars, loss, and death, but this scared him more than any battlefield. Because this was not a threat he could fight with a sword. This was fate knocking without mercy. When the child finally cried, Jamie closed his eyes, knowing deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. No celebration followed. No smiles lingered. The midwife crossed herself. Someone whispered that the child's eyes looked too knowing, too aware. Claire tried to dismiss it as fear and exhaustion, but she couldn't ignore the truth rising inside her. This child carried something unseen, something heavy, something dangerous, not evil, but powerful. Outside, the night stretched, on, untouched by dawn. And somewhere beyond time, the future shifted. A single birth had changed the path of everyone connected to Claire and Jamie Fraser. This was not just a child born into the past. This was a child who could rewrite it. Acade, long before the child was born, the warning already existed, was not. Written in books or spoken in churches. It lived in whispers, passed from one generation to another, always ending the same way with fear. An old Highland saying spoke of a child born between paths of time, a child who would not follow history, but bend it. Most believed it was only a story meant to scare children into obedience. Until now, Claire heard the words by accident, hushed conversation, a trembling voice. An elderly woman who had lived long enough to know when stories stopped being stories. The prophecy spoke of balance being broken, of time fighting back when it was pushed too far. And at the center of it all was a child who carried both tomorrow and yesterday in their blood. A child who would force impossible choices on those who loved them most. The terrifying part was not what the prophecy promised, but what it demanded. It said this child would bring healing and destruction in equal measure. That lives would be saved because of them, and lives would be lost. It warned that those who tried to control the child would fail, and those who tried to destroy the child would suffer even more. Time, it claimed, would protect its own creation. Jamie refused to listen when Claire tried to explain. It's not because he did not believe her, but because he believed her too much. He had seen stones pull his wife through centuries. He'd watched history repeat itself in blood and fire. If a prophecy existed tied to an innocent child, then it was already too late to stop what was coming. Meanwhile, Roger felt something else entirely, a pull he could not explain. Words from the past echoed in his mind, lines that did not belong to any song or record. Brianna noticed small changes, details in history that no longer matched what she remembered. Dates felt wrong. Names were missing. The prophecy was no longer waiting to be fulfilled. It was already awake, and the most chilling truth slowly settled in. The prophecy never asked if the child would change everything. It only asked one question: who would be willing to pay the price when time finally came to collect? This was not a birth meant to be remembered. It was meant to be hidden. The kind of night that history would later pretend never happened. Rain pressed hard against the roof, washing away tracks, blurring the world beyond the walls. It felt as if nature itself was helping to erase the moment. No candles were placed in the windows. No names were spoken out loud, because once a name exists, so does truth. The room was small, crowded with fear rather than people. The women worked quickly, their hands steady, but their faces pale. Every sound felt too loud. Every breath felt watched. Claire stayed focused, doing what she always did, saving a life. But inside, her mind raced. Knew this child's arrival was not just late or early in history, was wrong in a deeper way, like a page torn from the future and pressed into the past. When the child finally arrived, there was a moment of silence that stretched too long. No one moved, no one smiled. Then the cry came strong, sharp, and full of life. Too full. The sound seemed to echo beyond the room, beyond the hills, as if time itself had heard it. Tare felt her hands tremble. She had delivered countless children, but never one that made her feel this small. Jamie stepped forward, his face tight with emotion he did not name. He looked at the child and felt love strike him instantly, and fear followed just as fast. This child would need protection like no other, not from soldiers or sickness, but from knowledge. From people who would see the child as a weapon, a miracle, or a mistake that needed to be erased. The decision was made without words. The birth would not be recorded. Only a few would ever know the truth. The child would be raised in shadows, wrapped in silence. Because the moment the world learned this child existed, the future would come hunting. Outside, the storm slowly passed. The rain softened. But inside that small room, history had already shifted. A secret had been born along with the child. And secrets, once created, always demand a price. Claire had faced fear many times before. War wounds, dying patience, pain of loving someone across centuries. But this fear was different. This fear had no cure. As she watched the child sleep, small and peaceful, her doctor's mind told her everything was normal. Strong lungs, healthy color, a steady heartbeat. And yet, nothing felt right. It was the details that troubled her. The child reacted to sounds they should not recognize. Their grip was strong in a way that felt unnatural for a newborn. And worst of all, Claire felt the same strange pull she felt near the stones, a quiet hum in the air, pressure behind her eyes. Time was aware of this child, and that terrified her more than any illness ever could. Claire knew the future. She had seen wars that had not yet happened, diseases that would wipe out towns, and moments history claimed were unchangeable. This child stood in the middle of all of it, like a question with no safe answer. If the child lived, history could be rewritten. If the child died, time might break even harder, trying to fix what was lost. At night, Claire barely slept. She watched the child breathe, counting every rise and fall of their chest. She wondered if loving this child would be the cruelest mistake of all, because love would make her choose them over the future she knew. And the future, once changed, could never be put back the way it was. Jamie noticed the change in her, the silence, the way she avoided speaking about what would come next. But how could she explain that her greatest fear was not losing the child but saving them? But for the first time in her life, medicine was useless against what waited ahead. Claire finally understood the truth she had been avoiding. This child was not sick. The world around them was. And no amount of knowledge from the future could tell her how to heal a fate that had already begun to unravel. Jamie Fraser had made many promises in his life. Promises to fight, promises to protect, promises sealed with blood, land, and love. But none weighed on him like the silent promise he made the moment he looked at the child. He did not need prophecy or proof. He only needed that one breath, that one small hand curling around his finger. In that instant, Jamie decided this child would live. Honor had always guided him, but honor offered no clear path this time. Every instinct told him to shield the child from the world, even if that world included the people he trusted most. He had learned the hard way that knowledge could be as deadly as a blade. If others discovered what this child truly was, they would not see innocence, they would see power. power always invites cruelty. Jamie knew the ridge would not remain safe forever. News traveled fast and secrets traveled faster. Soldiers, scholars, and men hungry for control were always watching for signs of change. This child was change made flesh. Jamie began to plan quietly routes to disappear, names that could be changed, places where time itself felt thin enough to hide. What tore him apart was Claire. He loved her because she saw truth, but this truth might cost her everything she believed in. She might be forced to choose between the future she remembered and the child she had helped bring into the world. And if that moment came, Jamie already knew his choice. He would stand against time itself if he had to, against prophecy, against history, even against fate, because Jamie Fraser did not believe a child should pay for the mistakes of centuries. And if protecting this child meant becoming the villain in history's eyes, he would bear that burden without regret. But deep inside, Jamie understood something he dared not say aloud. Love could protect the child from many dangers, but it might not protect them from time. When time finally demanded its due, even Jamie Fraser might not be strong enough to refuse it. The changes did not come all at once. They never did. Time was subtle when it wanted to be cruel. Small things went wrong. First things easy to dismiss if you did not know what to look for. A name remembered differently. A familiar story told with the wrong ending. A moment that felt repeated, like it had already happened before. To most people, it meant nothing. To those who had traveled through time, it meant everything. Roger was the first to say it out loud. The past no longer matched the records he remembered. Songs he once studied carried different verses. Dates shifted by days and weeks. Brianna noticed tools being built earlier than they should have been, ideas forming before the world was ready for them. History was not broken, but it was bending, adjusting itself around something new. Claire felt it every time she touched the child. The air seemed heavier, charged, like the moment before a storm. Sometimes the child stared into space, calm and alert, as if listening to something no one else could hear. And when the stones were mentioned, the child would cry not in fear, but in protest, as if they already understood what those stones could take away at Fraser's Ridge. People began to feel uneasy without knowing why. Animals acted strangely. Horses refused certain paths. The nights grew longer, the silence deeper. Time was resisting, trying to correct itself. When time corrects itself, it never does so gently. Jamie tightened security. Claire kept watch. Roger searched for answers in fragments of memory that no longer lined up. They all knew the truth now, even if none of them dared say it. The child was no longer just a secret. The child was a force, and time, patient and unforgiving, had noticed. Every path had led here. Every warning, every secret, every crack in time pointed to the same truth. This moment could not be avoided. The child slept peacefully, unaware that their existence had brought the world to the edge of something unfixable around them. Adults stood in silence, each carrying a different fear, each knowing that doing nothing was no longer an option. Claire understood the cost before anyone else spoke it aloud. Time does not allow mistakes to remain. It demands balance. If something is taken, something else must be given. The child had already changed too much, bent history too far. To protect the future she knew, a sacrifice would be required. The cruelest part was that time did not care who paid the price. Jamie's answer was simple. Even if the choice was not, he would not allow the child to be the offering. Not now, not ever. He was ready to lose land, safety, even his own life, if that was what time demanded. Love to Jamie Fraser was not a weakness, it was defiance. And he would defy fate as long as he could still draw breath. Roger and Brianna saw what lay ahead. More clearly than anyone wished, the timelines were already splitting. One future led to survival through sacrifice. The other led to chaos through protection. There was no path without loss. The child was the center of both possibilities, the living key to what the world would become. As dawn broke, Claire made a decision she would carry forever. Not as a doctor, not as a time traveler, but as a human being who refused to let fear decide the fate of a child. The choice was made not to end the child's story, but to change how it would be told. Time would remember this moment. History would feel it even if it never recorded it, because from this day forward, the future was no longer certain.